All right, folks, that's what we're after in this little animation, and hopefully this will be a good introduction to After Effects for you. This is the basic setup for what I want you to try to accomplish using your own logo. Of course, you're going to use different effects and different graphics, and the whole thing is going to be different. But at least you're going to understand the basics of After Effects by the time we get through here. I apologize for the length of this demo, but we got a lot to cover. So let's jump in. All right, the first thing I want you to do is look up here in the upper left. And I'm just going to click in here, and that will paint a little blue line around this particular window. This is called the project window. And this is where all of your assets for the project are going to be. Now, the project that's built for you already, this is just for you to look at. This is, you're not going to use any of this. We're going to start from scratch, okay? So we've got a whole set of stuff in here. We've got a couple of audio effects. We've got this little icon right here indicates a composition. That's what all this is down here and up in here. And also we have a file that's been imported, and the file consists of a whole bunch of layers. These are all the layers that you're going to create in Adobe Illustrator. And when they're imported, this is how it's going to look. So let's go ahead and just re-import this file. So to import something, you can go three ways. File, import, file, or you can, let me hit the escape key here, or you can and say import file, same thing, or you can simply double click, and it will bring up the import dialog for you. And what we're going to do is import GeoStar logo 2 right there. Now again, we've already imported it, but we're going to import it again. Now it's going to come right up and ask, what do you want me to import? And your choices are either footage or composition. We want to make sure composition is the choice. Now with composition, that just ensures that your layers are going to come in rather than one single file. And immediately we got lots of new names for things and so forth. This is, it's come in as GeoStar logo 3. It renamed it for you, and then we end up with a new timeline here, GeoStar logo 4. That's kind of interesting. But anyway, here it is. So we've got a new timeline down here. It's basically a dummy for us. We don't even need it. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. That's interesting that that even showed up. What I'm going to do here is just select it and hit the delete button. We don't need it. Now I want you to double click on GeoStar logo 3. And that's going to give you basically a empty timeline, or not empty, but it's got all of the graphics in it that we need, but no animation. Okay, nothing in here is animating. Now let me describe this for you real quick. Down here at the bottom, this is the timeline, and these are all of the graphics that you have created in Adobe Illustrator. These are all the layers. And here is the timeline itself. It reads from left to right in time. So 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so forth. I'm dragging this thing called the playhead. Some people call it the CTI, the current time indicator. I kind of like the playhead better, but I may use either term. So you can drag it back and forth to scrub the timeline, or we can play the timeline by simply hitting the space bar. So let's go ahead and get started with our animation. Now before we go any further, I want you to come up here to the top of the screen and click on Window, go to Workspace, and go to Default. And just click on it. Okay, Window, Workspace, Default. Now we're going to go back again. Window, Workspace, and Reset Default. Now this is going to guarantee that we're all looking at the same thing together. Okay, now let's go ahead and double click on GeoStar logo 3, and that's going to open up down here in the timeline. Okay, so the timeline lists for you all of the layers that are in this particular composition. We call it a comp. And out here to the right, this is your timeline. And it's going to read from left to right in time, in minutes and seconds and so forth. Usually for us in After Effects, we're only talking about seconds. Down here at the bottom, this is going to zoom in and out on the timeline. So you can go way back or right forward. And we're just going to go so we can see all the way to our 8-second mark. And I notice here that if I go all the way back, I can see, whoa, man, this is a really long timeline. We're going to go up to the very top here and go to Composition, Composition Settings. This is something that's on the quiz. We need to set the duration for this timeline at 8 seconds. 800 down here at the bottom. 8 seconds, 00 frames. We'll click OK, and our composition is the right length. Yours might have been already, I don't know. We're going to get started here. The first thing we're going to do is work on this sphere right here, or this circle. We're going to make it look like a sphere, make it look like a sort of a little graphic of a planet. So we're going to click on the planet layer in the timeline. Planet right here. Okay. Now, up at the top, I want you, on the top right, I want you to click on Effects and Presets. And that's going to load this little dialog for you here. And this has got all kinds of different effects. You need to get in here on your own and explore this stuff. There are hundreds and hundreds. They're really cool. We're only going to use a couple today. So in Effects and Presets, I want you to type the word ramp, R-A-M-P. And that's going to give you an effect called Gradient Ramp. We're going to drag this over the planet layer. Planet right there. And that's going to just completely screw us up. Our beautiful purple color is gone, replaced by this gray, ugly thing. Up in the upper left, what used to be our project panel has now been replaced by something called Effect Controls. The project panel is still there, but we're just going to stick with Effect Controls. Every time you add an effect, this is going to pop up for you. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is turn off this little FX button. This is going to disable the effect. So we click off on that, our little logo turns back to purple. Now what we're going to do first is we're going to change the color of this ramp. This is a little gradient look that we're going for. So for the start color, we're going to click on the little eyedropper right here, and we're just going to drop it right over the top of the circle and click. That changes it from black to purple. Now we're going to click on the end color, and we're going to click this time on the color chip, not on the eyedropper, on the color chip. And we are going to just make this all the way black. So I want you to just click anywhere and drag all the way down into the lower left corner. And you should now see that the entire dialog says 000. If the hue says something other than 0, don't worry about it. That's this control right here. It doesn't matter because saturation and brightness are set to 0. That's going to give us black. So I'm going to click OK. And the next thing we're going to do is change where the ramp starts. And that is the start of ramp thing up here. So we're going to click on this little target icon and click right on top of the sort of the upper left quadrant. Okay. Now we're going to go to the end of ramp, little target here. We're going to click on that and kind of click down here in the bottom area, something like that. And now we can turn on the effect again and go see what it actually looks like. So click on the little effects box there to turn it back on. And we can kind of see, okay, this sort of looks like a sphere, sort of. Now we're going to change ramp shape to radial. Okay, and that gives you more of this kind of look, and you can pull these things around. You can do different things with it, whatever you like. You can just kind of put this to taste, but that seems about right for us right now. Okay, the next thing we're going to get into is the star animation. Okay, so we're going to click on the star layer, And we need to see a couple of things down here. We're going to animate both position and scale. So you're going to learn some keyboard shortcuts here real quick. Uh, PSRT, P for position, S for scale, R for rotation, and T for transparency. Okay, those are all going to be on your quiz, so you need to make sure that you've got those memorized. We're going to type the letter P for position, and you'll see position pops up down here. Now we need to also see scale, so I'm going to hold down the shift key and type S. And now we can see both position and scale. So let me explain what you're looking at over here real quick. You're going to see two sets of numbers. This represents, the first set of numbers represents horizontal, in other words, left and right, and the next number represents vertical, up and down. Okay, now notice right here, this little dot right in the middle of the screen. That's called the anchor point. And what that's telling you right now is that this anchor point, or this object, the star object, is actually anchored at the exact center of the screen. This is a 1920 by 1080 timeline. The center, the middle of that would be 960 by 540. Well, in this case, that's not really what we want. What happens with the anchor point is this is the point at which everything is going to rotate around, scale around, so forth. So you know what? I need rotation too, so I'm going to hold down Shift and type R. Okay, and there's rotation for us. So just to prove it to you, I'm going to spin rotation around. This looks a little different, this rotation dialog. This is actually telling you this is how many times I want to go around in a circle, and this is the degrees in a circle. 360 degrees in a circle, right? Anyway, we're still talking about the anchor point up here. So let me just go ahead and click and drag this guy. And notice up in the composition window that this circle is rotating around this anchor point, which is in the absolute center of the screen. Well, that's not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click undo, Control or Command Z. That'll put it back at the center. We need to now move this anchor point to the center of the star. So we're going to come up to the very top. This is our toolbar up here. We're looking for the tool called Pan Behind. It's located just to the right of the little camera icon here. So we're going to click on the Pan Behind tool. And what I want you to do is just grab hold of this guy and drag it right over the top of the star. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but get as close as you can. Now, I want to show you a quick little shortcut here, and that is on your mouse. If you roll the mouse in, it's going to give you a magnified view of the timeline. So we're just now looking right here. Just go ahead and center that up. But if you roll your mouse back and forth, this is just going to show you a magnified view. This is not scale anything up or down. We're just looking at, a, a magnified view. And you can see what the magnification is right down here on the bottom left of your composition window. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in just enough so that I can see the edges of the screen. Maybe I'll go in even further. Why not? We'll go in a little further for this, and then we'll come back out later. All right, we have the anchor point now centered on the center of the star. We're going to go back up here to the top, and we're going to click on the selection tool. The selection tool. That's sort of your default tool. Now, what we're going to do is start animating this star. So I want you to come out to 3 seconds in the timeline. There's two ways you can do this. One, you can just click out here to set this to 3 seconds, but it's kind of hard to hit. So instead, I'm going to come over here to this blue set of numbers, the time code, and I'm going to click on it and just type 300, 3 seconds and 00 frames, 300. And that's going to set the playhead exactly at 3 seconds. Now, once we do this, we are going to set keyframes for position and scale. Forget about rotation. You can do rotation if you want, but we're not going to do it here. Okay? Now, this is the ending point for the animation. This is the finish of the animation. Now I want to take the timeline and move it back to the very beginning. If your keyboard has a home key, you can use that. I'll just jump over here and I'm just going to hit the home key to jump there. If you have an end key, if you have a full keyboard, you can press the end key. It'll go to the end of the timeline down here. So we're back at the home position. I know I'm talking really fast, guys. We're trying to get through this as quick as I can. Star layer again. Here we go. We're going to grab the star and we're going to take it over here. We're going to grab it and drag it over to sort of the beginning of this orbit shape. You don't have to be exact. Nobody will know the difference. Okay. Now we are also going to change the scale from 100 to 0. Now I want to point something out to you here. Again, we have horizontal and vertical, X and Y, we call them. But there's this little chain link over here, and it's called constrain. So right now, these two properties are constrained together. So whatever one is, the other one's going to be also. And so if we were to drag this 100 number down, it's going to make it get really small. Okay, we want it at 0. I missed on that, so I'm just going to click and type 0 in there. We want it exactly at 0. Okay, and so if we were to scrub the timeline, we would see that this star goes from 0 to 100%. So let's get back to the very beginning of the timeline again. And what I want you to do, right now it's going straight from point A to point B, and I don't want that. Okay, what I want you to do is click on this very first point up here. And what this shows us is something called the motion path. Okay, now this motion path is a Bezier curve. Even though it's straight, we can make it into a curve, I guess I should say. So if you grab these little dots right here, you can start to move those things out. And the goal is to take these and try to get them centered as best as possible over the orbit shape right here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but kind of close. Okay, so if we were to scrub the timeline, we would see this happening. Well, you can't hardly see the star, so let's try it without the orbit in the way. Just turn off the visibility of the orbit layer right here. We can turn that off, and now we can see that the star is coming in there just like so. That's exactly what we want. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the orbit layer back on. Okay. Oh, I see I made a mistake here, and these two keyframes should be at 2 seconds instead of at 0 seconds, 0 frames. So I'm just going to drag a box around them and move them over here to 2 seconds. My mistake. Okay, there we go. We're fixed. Let's go ahead and go now to the orbit animation. We're going to do a little bit different thing here. Let's go ahead and go to 3 seconds in the timeline. And what we're going to do, before we go any further, let's go ahead and twirl up this star stuff. We'll just click on the little triangle there, and that'll get rid of it. It's still there. We just can't see it. And let's go up to Effects and Presets, and let's go ahead and clear out the search that we did the last time, ramp here. We'll just click the X to get rid of that. And what we're looking for is a transition called radial wipe. So go ahead and start typing R-A-D-I-A-L, radial wipe. There we go. Radial wipe at the very bottom down here. Don't make the mistake of changing any of the rest of these. Just we're in transition here. Radial wipe. I want you to drag that over the orbit layer. So you can just drop it right onto orbit. Okay, now we've got a transition on here, but nothing is happening right now. What we're going to do is come up here into Effect Controls. We're at 3 seconds on the timeline. We're going to click on the stopwatch for transition completion. There we go. And right now it's set to 0%. In your instructions, if you're following along with the instructions, we need to set this transition completion to 85%. Now, if you want to, you can drag this just to see what's going on. And we'll see, okay, well, there's something happening there. 85 is what we want, 85. So we'll just type that in and it goes away. Now we're going to set the wipe center, okay? And the wipe center for us, you've got the numbers here, but basically it's going to be somewhere around in this area. We want this thing to kind of arc around in a sort of what we call a clock wipe, okay? A radial wipe is the same as a clock wipe. So we're going to change the wipe center. So we're not going to click on the stopwatch. We're going to click on the little target icon right here, and we could just drag it, or actually we could just click somewhere in this area if we wanted to. But instead, we're going to get a little bit more exact. I have the numbers for you. 832 by 466. I'm going to hit the tab key. 46. Wow, I hit 466. Very close. 466. And well, I was pretty close. Okay, not exactly, but hey, while we're at it, I want you to do this. I want you to click inside the composition window, the comp window here. Just click inside it, hold down the control or command key and type R. That's going to put our rulers around the edges. This kind of helps us a little bit, but now you can see the pixel count. Okay, so what did we have here? 466 pixels. So if we looked at this little display here, we would see 466 is somewhere down in there, and 832 is listed up here somewhere. So it kind of helps to have these rulers showing. Okay, we are going to go now and set the feather over here in Effect Controls to 20. This is going to feather the edges by 20 pixels. Okay, and now we're going to jump to the 4-second mark in the timeline, like so. Did I hit it? Yeah, I hit it. And you could just type it in over there just like we did before. And we are going to change the transition completion number to 40%. 40. Let's see how that works out. Okay. So now I can't see any keyframes in this layer. Here's another keyboard shortcut for you. It's what we call the Uber key, the U key. Pressing U will reveal for you any animating components, any keyframes for this particular layer. And so we can see we have transition completion here. And if we look at this, if we scrub through, we can see sure enough, we have a nice soft coming in. So if we go back to the beginning of the timeline, we'll see starting at 2 seconds, we got 2 seconds of nothing, and then 2 seconds, the star comes in, right behind it comes the orbit. Pretty cool so far, huh? All right, let's keep on moving. We're going to move now to text, okay? Let's twirl this guy up. If you want to, you could also just press the U key again, and it will make those animating properties disappear. Again, they're still there. But we're going to worry about the type layer now. Unfortunately, I have to make you retype this stuff in here. I wish someday that Illustrator would bring the type in as is, but it won't. So we're going to retype. So go up here to the toolbar, press the T for the type tool, and we're just going to type GeoStar. GeoStar. Wow, that's not right, is it? So I'm going to go ahead and select the type just by dragging across. And you can see that the type settings are over here for us. The first one is Gill Sans. If you are on a Mac, it's Gill Sans Regular. If you're on a PC, it's called Gill Sans MT. I'm on a PC, so I'm going to start typing in over here. Oh, for us, as soon as we clicked on the type tool, the character dialog displayed and the effects and presets went away. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start typing Gill, G-I-L-L, Gill Sans, and for me it's Gill Sans MT Regular. That's already chosen for me, so I'm just going to hit the Enter key, and there we go, Gill Sans MT. Going to change the size of this to 48. And hit the Enter key, and there we've got our type. Now, a couple of things are going on down here. I realize faux bold is on. I need to turn that off. So make sure that is off. And it'll help if you go ahead and go in here and clear out these other settings. This is the tracking. We're going to set that to 0. Boom, there we go. And all the rest of this is important to us right now. So we're going to go up and get the selection tool, and we're going to drag this over the top. And what I want you to do now is kind of nudge it into position. And the way you do this is using the cursor keys, the left, right, up, and down keys on the keyboard. And it will nudge it 1 pixel at a time. A little pro tip for you, if you hold shift, it will nudge 10 pixels at a time in whatever direction you're working on. Once you've got it in the right position here, let's go ahead and make it the right color, yellow. We'll just click on the eyedropper, drop it over one of the yellow parts of the screen. And let's move on now to our next line of type, which is MediaWorks. So what we need to do is we need to deselect this line. We can do that by just clicking down here in the gray. Now we'll go get our type tool again, and we'll come down here in the bottom and type MediaWorks. Now, let me point out something else to you over here. This double T, this represents all caps. And most of the time in television, we're doing all caps anyway. So you can pretty much get by with leaving that on. So let's go ahead and select the type. Just drag across it. Again, I'm on a PC. If you're on a Mac, you're going to change it to Gill Sans Light 39. I'm going to change it to Calibri Light. Calibri, C-A-L-I, Calibri Light. I'm going to choose, it's chosen for me already, so I'm going to hit Enter and change the size to 40. Great. And now we need to set the tracking on this. The tracking is, we're going to go ahead and type that in, 28. Do you remember what tracking is from our Illustrator typography lesson? Tracking changes the space in between letters. It's different than kerning because it affects the whole line. If we wanted to kern individual characters, we would just go in between, click in between two characters, hold down the Alt key, and go left and right. Okay, and that would change the kerning. Okay, back to the selection tool, and we're going to drag this up until it's kind of best we can here. If you're in the Mac land, you're going to get this just right. For us PC folks, we just get it, it's not going to match up. It's a different piece of type. So, all right, we're centered up here, as best positioned as best as we can get it. Let's go ahead now, select the type layer and just delete it. Hit the delete key. Delete. Okay, great. Now we have our type set up and we're going to animate it. Now, we're going to put Starr on top of MediaWorks. Doesn't really change anything, it just reads better. Okay, and just like in After Effects and Photoshop, this layer order typically really does matter. Whatever's on top is going to show, like our background. If we move the background to the top, everything's going to disappear because that's a solid black layer. We'll come back to that later. Using that background is going to come in handy for us. We actually can just go ahead and delete the background layer. If you want to, you can just delete that guy. Doesn't matter. All right, we need to get back to 0 on the timeline. And we are going to select one or both of the text layers. Really don't need to select both at this point, but just clicking one, holding shift, clicking on the other. And we're going to come over now to Effects and Presets. We'll click on that one time. Now let's go ahead and clear this little dialog out. And what I want to point out to you is up in the upper right of this dialog, there's a little set of 3 lines. I want you to click on that and choose Browse Presets. We're going to go looking for text animation presets in this case. Browse Presets is going to open a new piece of software for us called Adobe Bridge. Now this is going to take a lot longer than it took me because mine is already open. For you, it's launching a new application. It's going to take a few seconds. You may want to Press the pause button while the software loads. Okay, once Bridge is open, the one we're looking for is text. Now, all of these are animation presets. All these are really cool stuff. You know, have fun with them later. Right now, we're just worried about text. We're going to double click on text. And these are all of the hundreds of text animation presets. We're looking inside blurs. And so we'll double click there. And the one we're looking for is called Bullet Train. Now, whenever you click on this, you should see an animation over here. Sometimes it takes a little while to load, but you can see kind of what the animation is going to look like. That's the one we want. So we're going to right click on this icon and choose Place in Adobe After Effects CC 2018. So we'll click here, and I see that my little After Effects icon is blinking at me, so I'm going to come back over here. Oh man, our text has disappeared. Not to worry. Look at this. Whoosh. It's already animating for us. It added that animation automatically. So it's in the wrong place for us. We need to move these layers to their correct location. Okay, so let's look and see where the keyframes are. We're going to press the U key, and since both of these layers were selected, we're going to see the animating properties for both of these layers. It's something called Range Selector Offset. So draw a box around these two keyframes, and we're going to drag them out over till so they start at about the 4-second mark. And then we'll take the second set of keyframes. We'll drag those over to, what does it say in your instructions? 415. 415. So I noticed that there's these things start and end at the same time. If you wanted to, you could drag them around a little bit, have them overlap some so that one starts before the other finishes. That might be good, something like that. So you can push these keyframes around however it makes sense for you. Let's preview real quick. We'll go back to the beginning of the timeline, press the space bar. Everything has to render. All right, so I think I'm going to take MediaWorks and move it. Oops. I'm going to draw a box around these, drag them down a little bit. I think that should happen a little later. Press the home key. Nothing happens. 2 seconds. Boom, boom, whoosh, whoosh. Perfect. That's what I want right there. Okay, now we're going to work on the background layer. Okay, let's go ahead and twirl these guys up. Remember I told you we were going to make a new background? Well, here goes. We're going to go up here to Layer, New, Solid. Now the color for this solid is going to be this yellow right here. So the way to do this is just to grab the eyedropper, drop it on top of the orbit layer or whatever, so you can get your color. We'll name this Starfield. Starfield. Great. Okay. Now, it's on top and it needs to be on the bottom, so we're going to drag it to the bottom. There we go. And let's add an effect. It's kind of a cool look, little negative space thing going on there, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to type in the effect CC Starr, and there it is, CC Starburst. We're going to drag that onto the Starfield layer, and we get some stars. It needs a little bit of work, so let's go ahead and fix it. We're going to make the scatter 300 and the grid spacing 4, and the size is going to be 40, something like that. But hey, I want to show you something real quick since we're here. Set the scatter to 0, and you'll see just a pattern of dots. And the dots can be different sizes. The grid spacing can be different. Watch this. If you animate scatter, whoosh, pretty cool, huh? It's kind of interesting little effect. But anyway, I digress. 300 is about what we want there. I'm going to roll my mouse back just to see what this looks like. So the logo is centered on the screen pretty well. Everything looks pretty good. Now, you've got some other settings here. Let's see, speed needs to be set to 0. Right now, this effect automatically animates. And so that's kind of cool if you want to set, keep that, but I want the speed at 0. All right, so we're almost there. Now all we're going to do is create a fade to black. So we're going to go layer, new, layer, new, solid. I guess really we could have kept our background layer, which was black, and just use it for this, but we didn't. Click on the yellow color chip. Make sure it's set to black. Saturation and brightness should be 0. We click OK. And we're going to name it, I don't know, black. We'll click OK. And make sure that black is on the top of the stack up here. And we're going to click T, transparency. T for transparency. And up comes this little dialog. Wait a minute, where's transparency? It says opacity. What gives? All right, opacity is the opposite of transparency. So when we see opacity at 100%, it is not transparent at all. It's 0% transparent. Let's set a couple of keyframes. We're going to come over to 6 seconds on the timeline, and we'll set the opacity to 0. And now we'll come out to, I don't know, 6:15 maybe. And we'll set the opacity to 100%. And so what that's done is that's made the black layer 100% opaque. So let's preview our animation. Press the home key, spacebar, it renders. All right, there we go. Now, we can roll in a little tighter if we want to see that. It really helps me to see the gray around the edges, so I like to roll back to see that. Roll in whenever we need to see something a little more exact in there. Now, the other things you can do is go ahead and add the sound effects to the timeline. We could drag the space MP3 down here to the bottom, and the music is going to play for us, and we could add this whoosh thing in. So let's say right around in here at the 2-second mark, we add a whoosh. So we'll bring that in. We're just going to drag the whole layer over so it starts right there. And let's duplicate that layer by typing Control or Command D for duplicate. And let's see where the next item comes in. What is it, 3 seconds, right? Or somewhere thereabouts, or like about in there, a little after 3 seconds. And so we'll drag one of the two of them down a little bit. So now we're going to have whoosh, whoosh. Let's press the home key. All right. That's the ending animation. You got what you got. I hope this has been helpful for you. Of course, now you're going to take these techniques, position, rotation, transparency, and scale, PSRT. Use these in combination with any effects that you want to use, experiment to your heart's content, and do your own thing with your logo. Create something cool. The idea is simplicity here. We don't want a bunch of complicated junk going on. We want this to communicate very succinctly. So have fun, and let me know if you have any questions.